Where's my daughter?
I don't know what you're talking
You were
about.
looking through a window last Where's my daughter?
If you come with me...
Where is she? Where is she?
Dead,
Julia! Me too.
Kyle is having a tough night. Recently widowed, the American aircraft engineer needs to fly her husband's body back to the US with her 4-year-old daughter, Julia. To cope with her anxiety, she takes prescribed medication. The next morning, it snows, and a taxi takes them to the airport. But once there, Kyle loses track of Julia. She panics. Kyle sees strangers, couples, and adults, but no one her daughter's size. Then, she spots Julia by a stand, looking angry. She tells her not to wander off without permission.
Julia?
As the woman boarded the plane, she noticed something strange. It was almost empty, with only her and her daughter on board. Her daughter had been silent since they got on, causing a feeling of unease. Fortunately, passengers began boarding soon after, easing her worries. This was a 10-hour long-haul flight. Shortly after takeoff, passengers began to fall asleep. Kyle saw 2 empty rows in the back cabin and took her daughter there to lie down. When she woke up from a nap, her daughter was missing. At first, Kyle thought her daughter was just playing nearby. However, after searching all 3 passenger cabins and not finding her, concern began to set in. Kyle finally panicked. One of the flight attendants, after learning about Kyle's situation, used the radio to ask all passengers to look for a blonde girl about 6 years old. However, a long time went by with no updates. She urgently requested a full search of the aircraft, but the crew dismissed her concerns, stating that no one could leave a sealed cabin at 3,000 meters. They said they would report it to the captain, but 10 minutes passed without any action. Suddenly, Kyle noticed 2 flight attendants whispering in a panic. She rushed after them. The stewardess, who hung up the phone, told Kyle, "I'm sorry, Miss Pratt, but I don't think your daughter is here." The flight attendant had contacted the ground crew, but they hadn't checked her daughter's boarding record, and her name wasn't on the passenger list. Kyle found this absurd and quickly looked for her boarding certificate, only to find that she had her own boarding pass, but not her daughter's. Panic set in as she rushed to the baggage hold and discovered her daughter's backpack was missing. Since her daughter couldn't reach that height, someone must have taken her. Kyle rushed to the cockpit, but as she pounded on the hatch, an air marshal stopped her, saying her actions were disturbing other passengers. However, her noise caught the captain's attention. He asked if she had been drinking or using drugs before boarding, implying he thought she was hallucinating. Kyle, lacking confidence, mentioned she was on anti-anxiety medication, explaining that her husband had died 6 days earlier, which is why she started taking it. She was flying to bring his body home for burial, with his coffin in the cargo hold. Anxious, she reassured herself that her daughter had been with her. She even held her hand before falling asleep. This was definitely not a hallucination, and her distress began to evoke sympathy from the captain. Despite everyone insisting they hadn't seen the girl, the captain decided to instruct all passengers to return to their seats so they could check every possible hiding spot for a child. This time, they thoroughly searched every corner of the cabin, including the baggage compartment and the bathroom, as well as the cargo and equipment areas, but still found no sign of her daughter.
Check every closet, every bin.
At that moment, an announcement came over the radio, allowing all passengers to move around and relax, indicating that the crew had decided to halt the search. Kyle, furious, approached the captain, insisting they shouldn't have ended it so quickly. However, he delivered news she couldn't accept. They received a fax from the hospital where Kyle's husband had died, stating that her daughter had been brought in at the same time. It implied that her husband had jumped with their daughter, which Kyle found completely unacceptable. The captain said nothing further and instructed Carson to take Kyle back to her seat. Later, Kyle woke up in her seat, where the captain had arranged for a psychiatrist to help her, and Kyle began to calm down as she tried to come to terms with everything. However, when she turned her head, she saw a little heart symbol painted on the glass, the same mark her daughter had made when they first boarded the plane. Controlling her emotions, she requested to go back to the bathroom, and Carson escorted her there. Before entering, Kyle asked Carson to uncuff her. Once inside, she removed her blouse, wrapped her fist in it, and smashed the door above her head. This led to the aircraft's equipment bay. She then found a wire and plugged it in, causing the oxygen masks to drop and triggering panic among the passengers. The cabin descended into chaos as she unplugged another wire, shorting out the equipment. All the lights went out. Kyle seized the opportunity amid the chaos and escaped from the bathroom. She entered the lift and rushed into the cargo hold, calling for her daughter, but received no answer. Meanwhile, the captain informed Carson that everything on the plane appeared normal. After some searching, Kyle discovered her husband's coffin and suddenly feared her daughter might be hidden inside. She hurried to open it, only to find just her husband's body, causing her to feel hopeless. She wished for help, and Carson soon found her, handcuffing her harshly. She requested permission to search the plane once they landed, but Carson told her she would be arrested immediately. As they walked down the aisle, passengers applauded, frustrated by the delay caused by her actions. Carson took her to the last row, but Kyle remained convinced her daughter was still on the plane and pleaded with Carson. Seeing her distress, Carson seemed sympathetic. However, he then went to the cargo hold, approached Kyle's husband's coffin, and removed the sponge from the outside, revealing 2 bombs and a trigger inside. It turned out to be part of a conspiracy he had orchestrated. He had hidden Kyle's daughter in the equipment bay and planted explosives near her head. Carson then reported to the captain that Kyle was demanding £50 million, or they would blow up the plane. Hearing this, the captain panicked. The captain attempted to negotiate with Kyle, but Carson immediately interrupted, lying that Kyle was unwilling to negotiate and didn't want to harm anyone, as evidenced by her allowing the passengers to leave first. He suggested that the captain have the airline wire the money quickly to give Kyle the illusion of control and to wait until all passengers were off the plane before arresting her. The captain agreed and returned to the cabin, where a stewardess stopped him. She turned out to be Carson's accomplice, having faked a call from the ground about the lack of boarding records for Kyle's daughter and provided false information about her death. When the plane landed and the passengers exited, Kyle rushed to the captain, insisting she would find his daughter, and demanded an apology. Frustrated, the captain informed her that the money had been wired and a G3 was waiting, suggesting they drop the pretense of the missing child. Confused, Kyle realized it was all part of Carson's scheme. She yelled for Carson to stop, asserting that he would get off the plane when she said so. Carson dropped the act and lunged at her, leading everyone to believe she was the perpetrator. If she revealed the truth, her daughter would be in danger. As the crew exited, Carson closed the hatch. In a moment of distraction, Kyle struck him with a fire extinguisher.
Me too.
While he was dazed, she cuffed him to the railing and found the detonator in his pocket. Carson then pulled out a gun from his sock, and upon seeing it, Kyle instinctively ran away. Carson fired at her handcuffs and pursued her. Fortunately, Kyle was able to dodge his bullets and found refuge in the cockpit. Carson, furious at the door, taunted her with shocking revelations. He disclosed that her husband hadn't jumped off the building himself. Rather, Carson had pushed him as a part of a plan to frame a hijacker who was familiar with the plane's layout. Desperate and resourceful, Kyle climbed up to the overhead walkway and threw a book to create a noise, making Carson think she was escaping. She waited for him to be distracted before she opened the cockpit door cautiously. However, just a few steps in, she encountered the stewardess, who appeared panicked. The stewardess's confusion from Kyle's quick questioning left her momentarily disoriented, giving Kyle the chance to strike with a punch. Hearing the commotion, Carson rushed after her. In a state of desperation, Kyle ran to the equipment bay, where she finally found her daughter, still unconscious. No matter how hard she tried, Kyle couldn't wake her up. The sound of Carson's approach echoed above them, prompting Kyle to glance at the 2 bombs nearby. An idea struck her. She took her daughter and hid under Carson's feet to avoid detection. Carson, in a fit of rage, shouted provocations for Kyle to come out and confront him. However, Kyle remained calm as she quietly maneuvered around him, taking her daughter with her into the passage. Carson soon discovered her presence, escalating the tension as the situation became increasingly dire. With those words, she closed the hatch and pressed the trigger, igniting the plane in flames. Moments later, Kyle emerged from the smoke, carrying her daughter in her arms. As onlookers caught sight of Kyle's face and the baby, they understood that she's been right all along. Once everything was settled, the captain issued a formal apology to her, and the crowd regarded Kyle as a hero. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.